Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and today I'm bringing you another one of those. I'm reviewing the first two books in a series, and I'm going to leave it on the big cliffhanger of it could all be terrible in the third book, we'll never know. Thankfully, today I am reviewing the Hell's Library series by A J Hackwith, and books 1 and 2 are fantastic. Even if book 3 is terrible, the first two books will have been great. Before we start, some disclaimers. I did receive a review copy of both of these books. I had a physical copy of the Library of the Unwritten and a digital review copy of Archive of the Forgotten. Regardless of where the books came from, nobody's paying me to talk about books, and all opinions are my own. And I'm also going to keep things spoiler-free for both books, which will make it somewhat difficult to talk about book 2, but if you have any very book 2 specific questions, feel free to drop me a comment and I will answer them. But we will be talking about both books, so if you want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, you don't want to even risk the slightest inkling of knowledge about either book, firstly, why are you watching this video? And secondly, click away now if you do not want to know. This is an adult fantasy series that in the UK is published by Titan Books. The Library of the Unwritten came out in February of 2020, and Archive of the Forgotten came out last week, probably when you're watching this, but February 2021. There is a title for the next book. I think I will maybe put that on screen if I can find it when I'm editing this, because I can't remember it right now. A J Hackwith is a queer writer of science fiction and fantasy based in Seattle. While she has been published in Uncanny Magazine, this is her first series, and obviously it's not quite complete yet, but it is very exciting. So plot summary. I'm going to give you the setting first, I think. So in Hell, there is a library. It is not Hell's Library, but it is a library in Hell, and this library is where all of the unwritten books go. So, for example, if you had an idea for a book and you never wrote it, it would still be shelved in the unwritten wing of the library. These books are cared for by head librarian Claire and her assistant Brevity, who is a muse, or should I say an ex-muse. Most of the time things are pretty quiet, but sometimes a book character will get a bit restless and wake up, and in a worst case scenario, that character will escape, and that's where book 1 starts, with a character escaping, and Claire, Brevity, and an unlikely addition to their gang, a demon called Leto, they need to chase after the character and bring him back to the library. But that escape sets in motion a chain of events which could bring disaster to the library and upset the balance of Hell itself. Book 2 follows on from the events of book 1, and I'll come on to that in just a moment. I think probably the biggest selling point of both of these books is that they are a really good adventure. They are a really good romp. From start to finish of both books, you have a fairly contained story. There is obviously an underlying theme, and you follow the same characters, and the events of book 2 are directly affected by book 1, but you read book 1 and it ties it off, and it just feels like characters doing a thing, which I don't know about you, but quite a lot of books, especially first books in series, feel like they are mostly world building, and this book has the world building, but it also goes, let's have a good time as well. I really like a story that ties off neatly, and I was interested to see how book 2 would fit into that, how the Archive of Forgotten would draw from the previous book. Were we going to throw out pretty much everything? And generally, I think it's just a separate adventure that is developing on the ideas of the first book. I talk about development. I think that that's interesting when it comes to the world building, because that's also one of the strongest elements of this series. The idea of a magical library is one that I think most readers enjoy in some way, shape or form. Obviously, there are hundreds of different ideas about that in the world. This is one of the fun ones, I think, partly because it's in Hell, so that's always fun for me. I enjoy that. But also this idea of unwritten stories being there. I think that's really interesting, and the way that plays out and the characters that emerge is really cool as well. One thing that doesn't come across in the plot summary is the various different worlds that they go to. So they're able to go to Earth, obviously, to go and rescue this character, but also we visit Viking afterlife. There are other afterlives that we visit in various different ways, and the way it all ties together is really cool, and I just think, as somebody who finds different afterlife ideas and post-death ideas really interesting, I liked that as a setting. And that's something that really gets expanded on in the second book, more so. We get to go to even more places, there are even more different things discovered, and it just feels like the moment you think, oh, I'd quite like to see this kind of thing, it'll do that. Overall, I think the world building is really interesting. I think that this could very easily have been a book that just took place in Hell and Earth, and to expand it out a bit more was definitely the right decision in my opinion, but also to then add to that as the second book comes on, and not just give us another adventure in the same place, but to expand on the ideas and the root ideology of this world you've created was a really interesting thing to do. I really love the characters in this book as well. I know I've done the classic plot world building characters, but I really do think that the characters are great. I love Claire as a protagonist for the first book. Her librarianness, her kind of pragmatism I really enjoyed. I also think Brevity is fantastic. I'm always going to love this kind of like slightly out there muse character, and the way that Brevity's museness affects her characters really interesting. Other characters who I don't want to talk about because I think it would spoil book 1 for you, but they continue to be fantastic in book 2. It's just a nice cast of characters that you like to read, you enjoy them. I think book 2 has slightly less balance between the different kind of development each character gets, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, and I like what book 2 does with the main characters. Hard not to spoil it, but suffice to say it's a good time. This book, unsurprisingly, also includes queer characters. There is canonically lesbian and canonically gay characters at the very least. But what I enjoy about that is my favourite thing, it's just never brought up as an issue. It's just a thing that happens, and that's always good in my book. In my book, literally. I don't know how it would feel to read this book if you were very, very Christian and that was very important that be represented well. I would say that this book, while it does represent Christian hell in a general understanding of it, it's more taking the idea of hell rather than saying like, here in, you know, this chapter of the Bible, this is a thing that happens. It's more abstract than that. But I think that the third book in particular could lean even more in that direction. So if that's something you don't want to read, then I would say maybe give this one a miss. Similarly, if that's something you're like, yes, I really do want to dig deeper into the idea of, you know, God and so such, then book 3, it could be there. I think my only other potential criticism for both of these books is that sometimes they are a little bit light on the detail and they lean a little bit into the tropes. And I think I noticed that more towards the end of book 2 than in any other moment. But just occasionally you'll be like, oh, maybe we could have dug a tiny bit deeper into that. But at the same time, I think then you would lose that fun adventure romp kind of feel to it, which would be a disappointment because I think it's one of the biggest selling points of these books. I had a ponder about what I would compare this to and what I would bring in, and I thought The Starless Sea is an interesting one because obviously it also has this kind of slightly magical books element to it. It is much more serious than Library of the Unwritten is, but I think there's still something there in the kind of adventure, the different places kind of feel to it. There's a similar overarching tone to the writing, maybe. I thought for some of the humour, I would recommend the Spellsinger series by Sebastian de Castiel, just in terms of the characters being the root of the humour. I think that's a really strong thing. The funny things are said by the characters, not by the narrator, which I appreciate. Some things have authors who think they are too funny. This is not the case. And likewise, another book that deals with, we have a lot of humour, but also some very emotional moments. I've recently read Nicholas Eames' books, Kings of the Wild and Bloody Rose, and I think they do a similar thing of balancing very humorous moments with very dark moments. I mean, Joe Abercrombie might be another one to bring in, though that's much more dark. But if you wanted dark but also humour, maybe. My final thoughts on this: I loved Library of the Unwritten when it came out. I was really, really impressed by it, and it definitely was equally fun on a reread. It has a lot of rereadability. So I think if you love that and you're interested in book 2, I think it completely lives up to book 1. It's maybe fractionally less impactful, but I think that as a trilogy it's going to be really strong. I think it is well worth rereading the first book, just because, as ever, you get more of the emotional journey the characters go on if you read them back to back. But if you didn't feel like doing that, you would be reminded by the book what happened in the first book. I always like to know if it's necessary to do a reread. I think you could get away with not doing it, but it is recommended. Are there any other good books that are set in hell / deal with afterlives? I would like to know. I will count As a Necromancer as dealing with afterlives if you want to talk to me about that. I do have Cemetery Boys on my list. Does that count? I would be interested to know if you've read that as well. Hit me up with those recommendations, pop them in the comments below. If you have anything else you want to talk about, have you read these? Did you like them? Again, comment that away. While you're down there commenting, be sure to follow me on all of my social media and subscribe because it makes me feel loved and appreciated. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. Gonna put this here. This bio, they are... Madam, do you mind? You stay there. Please don't fall down again. It's inconvenient. That was a sentence or something. I've just recently reread Nicholas Eames' books, not Killing Eve. Where did that come from?